All right, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the history of monasticism, which was a movement that started a little bit earlier than the 200s, but it became a fairly large movement within early Christianity, especially in Egypt in particular. But there were monastics all over the Roman Empire. This included both men and women, so women could certainly become monastics if they wanted to. And monasticism is really about leading an ascetic life, or being very strict with yourself, praying a lot, sometimes living by yourself, sometimes living in groups. And the image you're looking at here is a picture of Simeon Stylites, and I'll talk a little bit more about Simeon in just a bit. And what I sometimes like to do, of course, is give you the roots of words. And the root of monasticism comes from a Greek word, monasterion. And of course, we've talked about this. Monos means alone, like monarchy, one ruler. You've got three types of monasticism. And you see these three types in urban areas, and you see them in places like the deserts during this period in early Christianity. One is called eremitical. And the root here is eremos, meaning the desert. So you can be a hermit living in a desert, and we'll talk about some of that. You can be semi-eremitical. What that means is you live as a hermit, but you come together as a group. And you see quite a few. This is one of the more popular types of monasticism in early Christianity. And then you've got cenobitical. And again, what I've done here is given you the word. It just means common life. What that means is most people are living together, they're sharing meals, they're talking with each other. One of the most famous monastics from this time is a man named Pachomius, living in Egypt, born sometime in the late 200s, died in the middle of the 300s. Now you're probably wondering where monasticism came from. So the basic idea, and this is the case for a lot of early Christian groups, people could look at the New and Old Testament. And here's a passage from Luke 18:22. When Jesus heard this, he said to him, "Still there's one thing lacking. Sell what you own, distribute the money to the poor, and you will have a treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." Some people took this literally. They sold everything. They moved out into isolated areas, and they started worshiping Christ. And again, this movement really comes from the New Testament. So when you have a hermit, or when you have these cenobitical groups living all together, what I've got here is a list of things that they tend to do. Now, of course, not every hermit does the exact same thing, but in general, they spent a lot of time in prayer. They spent most of their days in prayer. They would usually wake up, do work if they were living in a group, like do agricultural work. They would pray for a good part of the morning. They'd pray for a good part of the afternoon. They'd come together to eat, and then they'd pray and then go to sleep and start the next day. This is the case too with spiritual exercises. They would read, they would think about what the New Testament said or what the Old Testament said. A lot of them were based on charity. So either people would bring food to them, or they would help out local communities. And in general, and this is where the word ascetic comes from, they abstain from a lot of things. So I just put a list of things here. No alcohol, no fancy clothes. Usually they just had like sackcloths or just something to cover their private parts. No sex, and no marriage. And again, remember that women can do the exact same thing. This is a fairly popular movement for women. One of the most famous ascetics during this period is Anthony, and I've given you his dates here. We have a work called The Life of Anthony, which most people think was written by Athanasius, who was the Bishop of Alexandria. And we'll talk about Athanasius here in the next couple of weeks. He wrote this work because he ended up meeting Anthony and was really impressed by the way he was living. And what I've given you here on the next, I think, 2 slides is a bit of The Life of Anthony, written by Athanasius, and this is chapter 7. So what I'd like you to do is to stop the video and then to read through this. All right, and as you can see from this is a pretty strict lifestyle. He eats once a day, sometimes once in 2 days, and often only once in 4 days. All he ate was bread and salt and water. And of course, as the text says, he would never have wine, would never eat meat, and so on. This is another bit of the life of Anthony, and again, what I'd like you to do is to stop the video and to read through this. This is Life of Anthony 8. Okay, and what you can see here is that, now remember, Anthony is living in Egypt. More than likely, these tombs are probably going back to the Pharaonic age. He would go into these caves, and he would have these spiritual fights, or sometimes physical fights, with the demons. And the demons were always worried about this, and you can tell from this particular one that they were worried that he would bring more people like him in and drive them out. And here's another bit of the life of Anthony, 94. What he's trying to do is, of course, spread Christianity and act like Jesus. So people wanted to learn about these ascetics, or learn about these monks or these hermits. And this is one purpose for the life of Anthony. And of course, once this is published, you get lots and lots of people wanting to move into Egypt, into these desert areas, and to join these monks. You also have a whole group of texts called the Saying of the Desert Fathers. And what I've done is I've given you 2 of these here, but there's quite a few. And I think you can find a lot of these on the internet. This one was written about by Abba Amenas, and Abba just means father. So Father Amenas. And he was asked, what is the narrow and hard way? And then it says what it is. And of course, this is the phrase that I just gave you. We have left everything and followed you. So that's one of the key indicators of a monk. You also have a bit of a story about Abba Arsenenius. And as you can see here, if you stop the video, go ahead and read through this, you'll see that he's crying all the time. He's weeping enough that it makes a channel in his chest, and he was seen as a hero. Again, one of the more famous ones is a man named Simeon. So Simeon moved to the desert, wanted to pray by himself, extremely ascetic. He hardly ate anything, he hardly drank anything. What started happening is that more and more people wanted to talk to him about the way he was living. And he ultimately got sick of it, and what he ended up doing is building a tower. Some think this tower or pillar, probably a better word for it, was about 30 feet in the air. And what happened is that this did not prevent people from talking to him, because what they ended up doing is, you can sort of see on this picture, we know that some people built these platforms next to his pillar so that they can stand next to him and talk. And people would bring him food and they'd bring him water, and he pretty much lived his life on one of these pillars. There was also a monastery built around his pillar, and again, lots and lots of people came to these monasteries to practice this type of early Christianity. And then I like these icons. This is a Russian icon of Saint Simeon. You can see him sitting in his tower.